Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT Innovators webinar on Google Workspace for nonprofits. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm Marketing Director at Community IT, and I'll be monitoring the Q&A in the chat and helping Steve with his presentation today.
I'm Steve Longenecker. I'm the Director of IT Consulting at Community IT.
We're getting some good chat, people sharing like the things that they find advantageous in one or the other. But we had a couple of questions come in that I think you could maybe address right now. One person says that they have users who really prefer Word and Excel. So do you feel like if you just tell them that they have to use the Google equivalents and just practice and start using them, they will eventually come to like them? Or how do you feel about those two?
It's a good question. I mean, I would say partly the answer is no, in the sense that there is no way that Google Docs can match Word, and there's no way that Google Sheets matches Excel on some of the edge or power user functionality. And it depends on kind of what you're doing. I think, for simple text editing, Google Docs is great and fine. Like and they've been improving it in the last 18 months or so. It's more full featured than it used to be, for sure. But the familiarity people have with Word, and it's interesting, if you get younger employees, they'll feel the same way. They'll hate Outlook because they like Gmail because they grew up with that in school, and my son, he's going to college next year. I mentioned he's just graduated, and they've just given him a Microsoft 365 account at the university he's going to. And he's like, this is weird. Like, he hasn't used Microsoft Word his entire life. And now it kind of makes him feel like an adult, like I'm graduating to the adult world when you start using Microsoft Word. I think particularly it's worth saying that for your finance people, they need Excel. Like, you just have to have Excel for them. But the fact that you can still save those documents to Drive, because you can, it's not really a problem. I think it's more on the problem is more, and maybe the person who asked the question in the chat was alluding to this. What about your culture? And what about if 75% of your people are happy to use Docs and trying to use Docs all the time, and you have, 25 or less % of your people that just don't want to, but they kind of need they need to collaborate with these other people. And especially if oftentimes the people who are fully committed to the desktop suite are the older people, and because they've been using those products for a long time. And sometimes by being older, you're higher up in the organization's hierarchy, and so it's harder to just tell that person, no, you gotta get with the new way. So I don't have a great solution for that. I think some of that is just going to have to be hammered out, in the organization, in the culture. The fact that collaboration takes give and take by different people, and finding ways to come up with that. I think,
I feel like this is a great segue into our next slide about, do we have a general recommendation?
Right.
And that has to do with familiarity as well, but also how much is your organization going to work within the suite of tools, and how much are you going to have to hybrid out? Right.
Yeah. So I'd say that if I were starting a nonprofit today, and I'm assuming, if it were me starting a nonprofit, I would probably be using Windows computers because that's who I am. So I'm a Windows computer user, and I would probably say, you know what? Having that Microsoft stack all the way up and down is going to be really beneficial in the long run. And I'm going to just go ahead and and sort of hitch my wagon to Microsoft's train or whatever that metaphor is, and run with it, because I know Microsoft's going to be around for, they're not going anywhere. They're going to keep investing in the platform and so forth. If I were on a Mac, if it was a Mac organization, I'd feel a lot less strongly about that. And I could probably be 50-50. Especially if it's a young nonprofit that, doesn't need to be in Word, like Google Docs probably is good enough. In some ways, one of the questions I have, big picture, is like, are documents even going to be around, in the future? Like, there's always going to be information saved on computers, but is it going to be in the form, like, we already don't print documents, right? So like the whole idea of Word, like getting the kerning just right and all that, that's kind of like gone away anyway. So, maybe Google Docs, like that simple editing is more than good enough. Like, you can do a whole grant application, send it to the grantor who can evaluate you and say you want it. And no one may have printed that out the whole time. It's possible.
Yeah. I think I love how you talked about it, I think earlier when we were talking about this presentation too, that if you're in the current, you can paddle the other way and use a different tool and make it work.
Right.
But generally the easiest thing is to stay in the suite and in the tools that you're in.
Right. I would say if you're already in Google, and you're like, I don't know if this Google works for me, I would say make it work for you, because it's a lot of work to transition. It's a lot of work to transition, and it's probably not worth it. Like they're close enough that you should be able to live well in either one. Now there are some caveats to that, like if all of your external stakeholders are in the other platform that you're not in, and that fact that collaborating externally, like, that might be easier, but it's a lot of work to change. And we generally tell people that it's not worth changing, that they're both really pretty good.
They're both good. I'm going to move us along a little bit now. We're going to do our next poll, which is we're going to start talking about how you use shared files. And Steve is going to give a quick overview of how shared files work in Google. So, and this also goes to, like we were saying, like your organization and your institutional culture. Mm-hmm. So if you have an organization that's super organized, maybe even OCD organized and hierarchical, you can go ahead and answer that. Or if your organization is a little bit more relaxed about internal structures and files, you can answer that, or other don't know, doesn't really apply, or haven't really thought about it. It's just something to think about as you're thinking about the file storage and how hierarchical that is. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll and show it. And we have a lot of relaxed.
Wow. Yeah. So rounding up, 30% of the respondents said that their organization is super organized and hierarchical. And then 60%, rounding down, are relaxed about their internal structures and files. And then we had 10% who answered not applicable or don't know.
So this also, there was a question that came in about using Google Docs offline. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that kind of is a good segue as well into our next topic, which is the shared drive and how
right. And that's a good point. I'll just address it, that the Google Docs can be used offline, even though Google Docs are in a browser. There's an extension that you can, add to your Chrome browser or whatever that allows you to work offline on Google Docs. This is now, we're shifting a little bit, and I need to pick up the pace a little bit, I realize. We're shifting now to sort of a specific, like, case study almost of the Google Workspace world. And I included it in this deck because I think it illustrates some of the differences, or some of the, what Google Workspace is and how it sort of operates. So we're going to talk about Google Drive, which is the place that Google Drive is where you save documents, right? So anything that you use Google Docs for gets saved to your Google Drive, but also that Word document that you edited in Word if you're a Google Workspace user, you can save it to your Google Drive, and that Google Drive can be synced to your local computer. So you can just save it right into File Explorer or into Finder if you're a Mac user, and it will sync up to Google Drive, which is the same thing as SharePoint OneDrive is for Microsoft 365, same as Dropbox is for Dropbox users, same as Box is for Box users. That's Google Drive. But what makes it kind of interesting is that, originally it was a consumer product. So was Dropbox for that matter. But, because it was sort of browser based, it was very flat. It wasn't really, they weren't really thinking about like having a really strong folder structure. Folders, when you're in a browser, can be an impediment to speed, because every time you click on a folder to open it to see it, your web page has to reload. And if it's on a slow internet connection, which is less and less of an issue, but in the olden days, you might have to wait 2 seconds to see what was in that folder, and it slows things down. So better just to save your files in your drive with no organization at all. Just save them, and when you're trying to see your files, if you're actually trying to scroll through them, it's like, thousands of files just all unorganized. But who cares? This is Google. Just search for it, and it will pop up to the top of your list because their search is so good. Even if you don't use the perfect terms, they kind of know what you want, and they give it to you, and it works great. Similarly, sharing, which you can do in all these platforms, and you can do it in Google Drive, is sort of ad hoc and peer-to-peer. And you just, if you're looking for something that's been shared with you, similarly, you may or may not look for it by navigating a folder hierarchy. You just search for it, and it pops up to the top of your list, and you open it. And who cares, like, who owns the document, as long as you have access to it. And that's kind of the principle of the whole thing. And this is a little bit different from the way that Microsoft, Box, these other things do. That this ownership, this end user focused thing, and it's worth spending some time talking about it. And so we're gonna talk about that a little bit. So just to preview, shared drives are Google's sort of answer to the headache that they've sometimes given to organizations by using the traditional Google Drive, where everything's ad hoc and everything's sort of saved wherever, willy-nilly, wherever they want to. So shared drives, unlike the Google Drive, which is mine and yours, and each person has their own Google Drive, shared drives belong to the team or the department that, whoever created it assigns a number of different people to it. And then that shared drive, even though they created it, isn't owned by them, it's owned by the organization, essentially. And if you put something, and if you share that shared drive with 4 people, when they save files to that shared drive or to a subfolder of the shared drive, they are essentially giving ownership of that document. It's not theirs anymore, and they'll be warned. It'll pop up and say, if you save it to this folder, it will no longer be yours. It'll belong to the shared drive. Is that okay with you? And you say, okay, yes, it's okay with me. It's still search still works all great and everything, but by solving this ownership problem, which we'll spend a little bit more time talking about, shared drive sort of solve that. And let me talk about the specifics here a little bit. So in my example here, we're looking at 2 little clips from a screenshot. So this is shared with me, okay? And there's a folder called Finance in it. This is a hypothetical, this isn't real, but in my hypothetical example, my boss, I'm in the finance department. And by the way, I'm not a finance person. So we work with lots of nonprofits, and I work with lots of finance teams in nonprofits. But if my example makes no sense operationally, forgive me, because but I'm assuming that I'm in the finance team. And one of the things that I do on the finance team is keep track of payments to outside contractors. So my boss, the CFO, has created a folder called Finance and has shared it with me. So my boss owns this folder, okay? But it's been shared with me, so I see it in the Share With Me section. And now I'm aware that I've already created a folder called Outside Contractors that had in it a subfolder called Reimbursement Receipts, and that was sitting in my drive. And so I'm like, oh, well, this shouldn't be in my drive. This should be in the finance folder that's owned by my boss. So I drag it into the outside. I drag the outside contractors folder into the finance folder, and it warns me, well, anybody that has access to the finance folder. So it's no longer going to just be me and whoever I've shared it with, because my boss hasn't just shared this finance folder with me. I have 3 other colleagues on the finance team, and those 3 other colleagues are now going to be able to see the outside contractors. Well, that makes sense. I'm on board with that. So now this folder is inside finance, and reimbursements receipts is inside outside contractors. And anybody that has access to the finance folder has access to all of this. And I've shared reimbursements receipts, here's a little sharing icon, with the 7 or 8 outside contractors. They don't have access to the other stuff higher up, but they do have access to this reimbursement receipts folder. And I've said, hey, anything that you want me to pay you for, you need to put your whatever it is, your document or your spreadsheet that you need me. So here, someone named Sarah Schoenfeld has put in a document here that has some consulting fees that they want to be paid for, and it's been saved here by them. But this is an outside person. They are still the owner. So the point here is that their ownership gets really crazy. Like, I actually, like, let's say that Sarah Schoenfeld is no longer working with us or whatever. We're trying to clean this up, and the CFO one day is going down into their into their folder that's theirs, and they see this folder and this folder. They go in and if they can't delete this because it's Sarah's, they can remove it from this folder, but it's always going to be in Sarah Schoenfeld's drive. It's Sarah Schoenfeld's. You can't get rid of that. And conversely, Sarah Schoenfeld can always delete it from her drive, and if she does, it's going to disappear from my folder, even though I kind of think it's mine now because she put it in there. No, it's hers. She owns that. This can create some problems. We did have an example of a client that the marketing person shared a folder where they invited a bunch of youth to record like 5-minute videos with their iPhones or whatever that was just talking about how helpful or whatever valuable this program had been to them. So they like record a video, whatever, I don't know, this after school program, I don't know the details. This after school program changed my life, blah, blah, blah. I love it, whatever. It's a great video. The marketing person, got them to sign a release so that they could, knit these videos into a larger, video that I don't know what the video was for. Obviously, you could use it for fundraising, but maybe it was also used as a part of the program deliverables. I don't know. I was helping her like a year later with some other stuff, and she's like, wait, where are my videos? All the releases were still there because she owned the releases, but the videos were gone. And I was like, well, I don't think they weren't your videos. And probably, I just assume, videos take up a lot of space. Those young people needed some space back on their Google Drive. They were using the free version of Google, I'm sure. They were probably 16, 17 years old. So they deleted it, and it was gone because it wasn't theirs. If they had been using a shared drive, then if they had shared it, when the young person saved the file into the shared drive, it would have been popped up and said, hey, are you willing to give ownership to this person and to this organization of this file? And they generally, people are not averse to that. They're not really thinking about ownership at all. It's really a kind of a technical concept that doesn't really have anything to do with real life functionally. But it makes a difference in these specific cases. And it also makes a difference in just like funky things like when someone leaves your organization and it's time for you to close their account. They own all these files. And what do you do about that? Well, Google has a way of transferring ownership, and you can do that, but it has to be transferred to someone else, and those files have to sort of move around. And it would be a lot cleaner. And Microsoft never had this problem. Box never had it. It was kind of a fact of the way Google, and it makes it sound like I'm talking badly about Google. I'm giving an example of where the evolution of Google's products from sort of being a consumer product does create a challenge potentially for administrative control and stuff. The product works well as long as there aren't those things happening that sometimes do happen. So I'm not really trying to slam Google on that, but I do think it's important for all of you who are using Google to make sure that you start using Google Drive, shared drives.
Shared drive.
Because, the shared drives, because of the things will come back at some point to potentially cause problems for you. What makes it even more complicated, I'm sorry, do you mind if I run with this, or are we?
Only if you do it quickly, because we're going to run out of time.
Okay. So this last slide here is about if you're trying to, let's say that now I'm going to, instead of using that, having my outside contractors be in a drive that was shared with me, I'm moving it to a shared drive called Finance. I drag it in and it says, do you want to change the ownership? It doesn't just say that you're going to change who can see it, but you're changing ownership. And I say, yes, move. Only a super admin can move a folder because of the problem that I'm about to speak to, which is the fact that they know that the ownership of all of those files inside are probably all over the map. They basically don't want to allow, you can, as an end user, regular person, you can move individual files, but folders need to be done by a super admin because of the fact that the stuff inside the folder is almost certainly owned by different people. So they're just trying to stop that from being a problem. And if something in that outside contractors folder is owned by an external person, you can still move it by clicking the move button, but the move won't be perfect. And there will be problems because it can't move. It can't change ownership of external stuff. You as a super admin only have super admin control of your workspace. You don't have control over Sarah Schoenfeld's stuff. That's outside of your workspace. That's an external person. So
when you see that folder after you've moved it, those files are just not in it.
They would still be in the old, there would be duplicate folder structures with most of them being empty, but some of the external stuff still remaining on the non-shared drive side. It'd be a weird thing where like these folders are mostly empty till you get to the bottom and it's like, oh, there's these 3 files in here. Yes, you're exactly right. You have to sort of see it to understand it, but it's just something to be aware of. So get going to shared drives if you haven't yet, and be aware that as you get, starting fresh is one thing, but if you try to move old stuff in there, potentially if there's external stuff saved in it, it could be, you have to work around that and figure out how to solve that problem.
Well, someone was asking or mentioning in the chat about clutter in general of like your, the way it always has been. You could create as much as you wanted to, thinking about storage, of course. But I think, so it's just a different way of looking at it. Are you hierarchical and you have these folders that are in the structure and you keep them clean? Right. Or are you kind of, we'll find it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I will say that my own take has shifted a little bit. I used to be much more about keeping everything clean and uncluttered and hierarchical and finding things through a folder structure. And as search has just gotten so much better and so fast. And with my email too. I used to put all my email in different folders, and now I just kind of like it's just one inbox and I drag it.
You're going to look for it.
I'm going to search for it and it's going to come up very quickly and it's not going to be a problem. And it's like, that just changed in the last 3 years or so for me.
Yeah.
And it's
and
like,
people,
and it works.
It's not there yet. I think there was some.
Right. Well, some people use that sorting, not just as a way to like build in the ability to find it in the future, but like it's a way to process. You're thinking about the emails and organizing as you go. And that's fair.
Yeah.
All right, we have to get through this. Yeah.
Yep. So we have this. I think so. If you had a question in the Q&A or in the chat, we're probably not going to be able to get to it, but I will be sending out the link with the to the video when I post that in the podcast and the transcript. So we will put any questions that we didn't get to in the transcript, and Steve will give us an answer on those. So don't worry, but it won't be until next week. So can you combine Google Workspace and Office 365?
Yes. And we do have clients that do. And in fact, as you've already alluded to earlier, that's what next month's webinar, which I'm not doing, but we have a client that is doing a combination. And so Carolyn will be interviewing them and the ITBM who works with them on what it's like to sort of straddle and be in both. I do think you need to. It's not like you should say, well, we have both and you can use both for everything, because then it's like people will have their preference, but you will never know which platform to look. So you definitely want to have like some clarity that, okay, and first of all, email you can't have in both, because the world needs to know where to send the emails to. And so everyone's either in Office 365. I mean, you can have a mailbox, but like in terms of receiving external email, it can only go to one or the other for the most part. You can do forwardings on individual mailboxes, but that gets really tricky very quickly. But like if you say, all right, we're going to use Office 365 for email, and obviously with email, calendaring sort of goes right together because you have to email meeting requests and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to use Google Drive for our documents because we work with so many external stakeholders who are also using Google Drive, and it just works better to be in the same world as them on that. That's like a nice division. So you need to think about that. So it does require good governance and documentation and training so that people know which system to use when. We do have a thing here about ID being a decision point. Most of our clients that are doing this at this point are not trying to do single sign-on. They just have two different set of credentials. But if you want to do single sign-on, you can. But you just got to sort of think about which one's the primary one, and then probably make that one the one that you sign into with. The last thing I'll say is that the thing that we're seeing the most of is that our Windows users, so if you're a Windows-centric organization in terms of the computers that you use, but you have Google for email, Drive, calendaring, all the stuff that was in that list of icons at the early slide. But now you need to think about managing your Windows computers. We would say, hey, probably you should go ahead and especially since for nonprofits it's not expensive, go ahead and sign up for your Office 365 account just to manage the Windows computers. And that speaks to what I was talking about. There's a very nice split there. We're just using Microsoft 365 to log into our Windows computers and have some policies on those Windows computers about things like encrypting the hard drives and being able to manage them remotely by doing a factory reset if we need to, or managing their updates, that kind of stuff. So that's the split that we would see the most commonly.
I got to jump in because we are doing a whole webinar on it next month. So can you go ahead to that?
Oh, yes, I will.
I
will skip ahead. Yes.
Look for that. So we're so excited. We will have Dominic Diggs from the Social Justice School, which is this really cool charter school in DC. And they are doing this. They have Office 365 and Google Workspace, and they have managed to create a hybrid situation at the enterprise level. So we're going to talk about how they did that and what the issues are and how to think about it. So it's not just for schools and education tech. I think if you've got a hybrid situation, this would be a good webinar to come to. It's just a case study. So you can register on our website or look for the email link. Don't think we have time to go back over the learning objectives, but I hope that you did get a chance to kind of learn more about Google Workspace, the different approaches of Google Workspace and Office 365. And thank you, Steve, so much for that deep dive, shallow deep dive into file sharing, because really that could be its own webinar, but you just touched on some of the things to think about and what happens. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you, Steve. This was super informative. And like I said, I will be sending out a link and we'll be posting the video and the podcast and the transcript with all of the other links that we talked about and the questions that we didn't get a chance to answer. So again, thank you so much, Steve.
Sure thing. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.